Life can flip in an instant, especially when you're a young waitress just struggling to get by. Evelyn Parker never expected to stumble upon a ghost from her past in the shimmering halls of the city's grandest luxury hotel. But on a quiet afternoon, when she's tasked to deliver a tray of delicate pastries to the VIP lounge, her entire world shifts. This lounge caters to the elite, the secret keepers, and the life changers. Unknown to her, seated on a velvet sofa, is the very woman who abandoned her at birth, a millionaire whose decisions will throw Evelyn's life into spiraling chaos. Evelyn Parker always prided herself on her work ethic. At only 21, she had seen her fair share of life's unfair turns. She grew up without a mother, raised by her single father, Christopher Parker, in a modest suburb outside Chicago. Since she was a child, Evelyn had learned how to fold laundry, cook dinner, and keep the household running in her father's absence. He worked long hours as a mechanic, pulling double shifts to keep their simple apartment. The pair was close-knit, supporting each other through every challenge. Now, dressed in a crisp white blouse and sleek black skirt, Evelyn balanced 2 trays of hors d'oeuvre, maneuvering through the corridors of the iconic Rosenwald Hotel. Inaugurated decades ago and recently renovated under the partial investment of real estate moguls like Charles Whitford and Rumor, had it quiet backing from investors like Larry Ellison, famous for funding top-tier resorts. The Rosenwald boasted the largest event center in the city. Its staff took pride in flawless service, from the flick of silver cutlery to the sheen of polished floors. Evelyn had been a waitress at the Rosenwald for nearly a year. The job paid well enough to help her cover community college tuition and her father's medical bills after a recent knee injury. She was grateful for every tip, every extra shift. But some days, she felt the stings of exhaustion, of not having time for friends, for a life outside these gilded walls. The hotel was glamorous. Guests wore designer suits, diamond-studded shoes, and stepped out of Rolls-Royces. In contrast, Evelyn's world was overshadowed by lingering student debt and the constant worry about her father's uncertain health. She told herself that she was doing what she had to do. After all, she'd never had anyone but her father. Her mother, Helena, had disappeared from her life when Evelyn was merely an infant. The only memory Evelyn possessed was a single photograph, now faded with time, showing a woman cradling a newborn. Evelyn's father had always remained guarded about the subject. All she knew was that Helena left without a word, and he never heard from her again. On that particular day, Evelyn was assigned to bring a special selection of pastries and champagne to the newly refurbished VIP lounge. Little did she know that waiting behind those tall doors was the millionaire mother who had once cradled her and left her behind. The exclusive VIP lounge of the Rosenwald Hotel was breathtaking. Golden chandeliers dripped from the high ceiling, and plush velvet couches lined the marble floors. A string quartet played softly in the corner, adding a gentle melody to the hush of low conversations. Wealth and influence hung in the air. Powerful politicians, tech millionaires, and heirs to vast fortunes regularly booked this sanctuary. The staff had strict instructions to maintain the highest level of discretion. Evelyn, nervous excitement coursing through her, clutched the tray tightly. It always felt intimidating stepping into this lounge. The men and women here rarely made eye contact with someone of her station. In their world, waitresses were invisible. Only a few, like the philanthropic media personality Harriet Davis, who occasionally passed through, treated staff with genuine kindness. Harriet once told Evelyn that her own mother had been a maid, so she believed that respect should be extended to everyone. But Harriet wasn't here this afternoon. Through the glass doors, Evelyn could already see clusters of well-dressed patrons. In one corner, an older gentleman with a trimmed white beard was flipping through a leather portfolio, occasionally glancing around with curious eyes. At another table, two women whispered conspiratorially, leaning over laptops open to spreadsheets or real estate listings. Every so often, shrill laughter interrupted the discreet atmosphere. Evelyn swallowed her anxiety, counted to 3, and carefully pushed through the doors, head held high. She wove past a cluster of chairs and angled toward the lounge bar, prepared to hand out the pastries. Yet just as she set down her tray, she noticed someone, a tall, elegant woman with ash-blonde hair styled in a sleek chignon. The woman's posture was regal, her expression aloof. Diamond studs glittered on her earlobes, catching the subdued light. One glance at the woman's face made Evelyn's breath catch in her throat. Evelyn wasn't entirely sure why her reaction was so immediate. Perhaps it was the curve of the woman's jawline, a certain softness in her eyes. But something about this figure was unsettlingly familiar, sparking a sudden pang in her chest. She tried to ignore it and resumed her professional smile, offering the tray of sweets. The woman's gaze flickered over Evelyn, pausing for a moment as if registering something equally odd. Then, almost dismissively, she turned back to the man she was speaking with, an impeccably dressed individual sporting a powerful aura. Evelyn tried to bury the strange sensation and refocused on her task. Yet a tingling apprehension fluttered in her stomach, as if fate herself had nudged Evelyn closer to an unavoidable discovery. Evelyn managed to complete her rounds without mishap, though her fingers trembled slightly each time she replenished the champagne glasses. Dismissing her sense of foreboding, she chalked it up to the usual nerves that came with serving high-profile guests. Once she finished, she slipped out of the lounge, heart racing as she headed to the back corridor where staff often took a quick breather. She leaned against a cool, tiled wall, eyes closed, exhaling heavily. A swirl of questions buzzed in her mind. Why had that woman's face looked so profoundly familiar? Could it be someone from a magazine or a TV interview she'd once glimpsed? She wondered if it was just a case of déjà vu. A hand tapped her on the shoulder. Startled, Evelyn opened her eyes to find her friend and co-worker, April Rodriguez. April was a petite brunette with bright eyes and a no-nonsense attitude. She held a half-eaten croissant in one hand. "Hey, everything okay?" April asked between bites. "You look like you've seen a ghost." Evelyn forced a shaky laugh. "I'm all right. The lounge is buzzing with big shots today." April rolled her eyes. "Tell me about it. The manager just told me to double-check the floral arrangements. And you know what that means. Some super important VIP is in town. Word is, she's a major investor visiting from Europe, possibly one of the Donovans. They have a seat on the board of something big." The name rang a faint bell in Evelyn's mind. Donovan. She recalled her father once, long ago, uttering the name Helena Donovan in a moment of anguish or anger. But she had never pressed him for details. She was too young to remember the context. Could it be the same Donovan, the wealthy woman who had parted ways with her father ages ago? Pushing the unsettling thought aside, Evelyn mustered a grin for her friend. "Right. Let's just get through the day. See you at closing." As she walked away, she tried to recall bits of her father's rare stories about Helena. All she had were fragments of an argument overheard through a closed door, a heated mention of betrayal, and the name Donovan. Could Helena Donovan be the mother who had left her? Or was it all just an unlikely coincidence? Uncertainty clouded her mind. Little did she know that her questions would soon be answered, and her life turned inside out. Helena Donovan sipped her champagne delicately, her diamond bracelet catching the light with each movement. She felt the slight tremor in her fingers, a reaction to the proximity of the young waitress who had just come by. A wave of memories rushed over Helena like a cold gust of wind, whispering names and faces she had tried to bury. For years, Helena had built a fortress around herself. She was a millionaire with stakes in global industries, real estate, fashion, tech startups, some of them personally introduced to her by the infamous Ivy League broker George Harrington. Her name graced philanthropic galas, glossy magazines, and the boards of several charitable foundations. By all appearances, she was untouchable, a vision of success. But beneath that polished exterior lay painful secrets. She recalled the moment she walked out of Christopher Parker's modest home over 2 decades ago. At 19, she was terrified of motherhood, of poverty, of the future she had never planned. Helena was convinced that if she stayed, she'd be stuck in the same cycle of struggle she'd watched her own parents endure. She wanted to chase her dreams, to become a someone in a world that rarely acknowledged the powerless. So she left. And with that decision came a lifetime of guilt she tried to drown with wealth and accomplishments. But now, seeing that Waitress, what was her name? Her name tag read Evelyn. Helena felt something she hadn't experienced in years, an ache in her heart. The girl's eyes had sparked a fleeting recognition in Helena, stirring a longing to reach out. It had to be a coincidence, she told herself. She'd never told Christopher her new last name after she disappeared, and Chicago was a big city. Thousands of mothers and daughters parted ways every day, never crossing paths again. Yet the possibility that this was her daughter gnawed at Helena. The eyes, the tilt of her chin, the softness in her features, it matched the infant Helena had once cradled in a hospital bed. She shuddered, setting her glass down. She had come here today on business, planning to finalize an investment deal for a chain of boutique hotels. Meeting a ghost from her past was never part of the agenda. Still, she couldn't ignore the feeling that fate had drawn her back to the very child she once abandoned. Evelyn's next shift required her to stay late into the evening. Private receptions were scheduled back-to-back in the Rosenwald's grand ballroom. After rearranging tables for a VIP dinner, she volunteered to help serve a closed-door negotiation session in the lounge. It was unusual for staff to directly serve these high-powered discussions, but the manager trusted Evelyn's tact and professionalism. She brought a fresh tray of sparkling water and placed it on the conference table. Seated at one end was the same woman from earlier, Helena Donovan. This time, Evelyn noticed the name on a paper portfolio resting in front of her. Her heart hammered in her chest. Without meaning to, she stalled, her gaze drifting over the letters H-E-L-E-N-A-D-O-N-O. Man in a sharp grey suit cleared his throat, snapping her out of her daze. She set the water pitcher down and muttered a polite apology before stepping back to the corner of the room. From there, Evelyn couldn't help but overhear bits of the meeting. They were discussing expansion of the Donovan brand's luxury real estate arm. Some of the men and women in the room were city officials, local tycoons and lawyers. Helena Donovan took the lead in every conversation, her tone calm but firm, skillfully guiding each argument to her advantage. As the meeting concluded, the participants funneled out, shaking hands and exchanging final remarks. Helena lingered behind, gathering her papers and typing a quick note on her smartphone. Evelyn moved to clear away the water glasses, thinking she could slip out discreetly before any awkward moment. But Helena turned just as Evelyn lifted the tray. Their eyes locked. Helena opened her mouth as though to speak, and for an interminable second neither said a word. The hush in the empty lounge pressed in on them. Evelyn's face felt flushed. She half expected some curt dismissal. Instead, Helena broke the silence. "You Evelyn, right? Could we talk for a moment?" she asked, her usually poised voice laden with hesitation. Evelyn's heart thudded. Yes, ma'am," she managed to reply. Helena walked toward her, each step measured, carrying the weight of years. She took a breath, And in that instant, Evelyn felt that the entire world had narrowed down to this conversation. These two women finally facing each other after decades of separation, though only one of them truly understood the significance of the moment. Evelyn set the tray down on a nearby side table, acutely aware of Helena's gaze sweeping over her, as if memorizing every detail. Helena's expression was tense, her posture still perfectly straight, but there was an undercurrent of anxiety behind her eyes. "I'm sorry if this is abrupt," Helena began, choosing her words carefully. "You remind me of someone I knew a long time ago." She paused, apparently unsure how to continue. Evelyn's stomach clenched. "Oh, did you know my father by any chance?" Helena's breath caught. In that moment, she realized she could no longer dance around the truth. "Your father, Christopher Parker." The air between them crackled with an almost tangible electricity. Evelyn swallowed hard, her voice trembling. "Yes." Helena's composure broke, and her eyes glistened as she tried to maintain her calm. "Evelyn, I need you to understand something. I made a mistake a long time ago, and I've regretted it in ways I can't even express." Silence stretched, thick with emotion. Evelyn felt her pulse pounding in her ears. She thought of the sleepless nights, of her father's tear-stricken face whenever the subject of her mother arose. She thought of the meager birthdays, the times they were forced to celebrate quietly because they couldn't afford more. Then she recalled how her father never bad-mouthed Helena directly. He simply said she left. "So, it's true," Evelyn said quietly, tears gathering in her eyes even as she fought to hold them back. "You're her." In the hush of the lounge, Helena admitted the truth. "I'm your mother, and I know saying I'm sorry isn't enough. I left without ever looking back, and there isn't a day I haven't thought about that decision." Evelyn's emotions swung wildly: anger, confusion, a shred of longing she had buried for years. In her mind, she saw the old photograph tucked in a drawer at home, the one showing Helena's younger face. She had once dreamed of a tearful reunion filled with joy and love. But the reality was messy, tangled with money, power, and Helena's unwavering drive to succeed. For a moment, mother and daughter stood inches apart, uncertain how to bridge the 20-plus years of separation. Then, as if stung by the enormity of it all, Evelyn rushed out of the lounge, leaving Helena behind, grappling with the shock of watching the child she had once abandoned vanish through the same doors yet again. Evelyn escaped to the employee locker room, her heart throbbing with pain. She splashed cold water on her face and stared at her reflection in the mirror. Gone was the carefully maintained composure that her job required. In its place was a raw, vulnerable young woman whose life had just been upended. Questions battered her. Why now? Did Helena come back out of guilt, or was there some ulterior motive? The memory of Helena's regal posture and designer clothes flashed through Evelyn's mind, reminding her just how different their worlds were. She recalled how her father struggled to pay for her school supplies when she was a kid, how the landlord threatened eviction more than once, and how they had to rely on the kindness of neighbors like Miss S. Gaza for groceries during tough months. Meanwhile, Helena Donovan had apparently skyrocketed into fortune and fame. When she finally emerged, April was there, concern etched on her features. "What happened? You look like you've been crying." Evelyn tried to speak, but a sob choked her words. April guided her to a quiet spot behind the kitchen, where staff usually took quick smoke breaks. As the distant hum of dishwashers filled the silence, Evelyn told her the truth in halting phrases. "Helena Donovan is my mother," she said, tears threatening to spill. "She left me and my dad. She's here now, after all these years." April's mouth fell open. "Oh my God. Evelyn, that's huge. What does she want?" Evelyn shook her head, hugging herself against a chill that seemed to seep from her bones. "I don't know. She says she's sorry, but she's also part of some big business deal. Why show up now?" Why in the middle of a negotiation? It makes no sense. April squeezed her hand reassuringly. Maybe you should talk to your dad. He deserves to know about this. That's the thing, Evelyn whispered. My dad's been in and out of the hospital. I don't want to stress him out, but what if he already knows? The weight of the revelation threatened to crush her. For so long, she had lived with a vague hope of someday meeting her mother. But the real encounter turned her upside down, stranding her between longing for a mother's love and fury at having been abandoned when she needed it most. While Evelyn wrestled with a tumult of emotions, Helena returned to her penthouse suite in the Rosenwald, unsettled by their brief confrontation. She stared at the panoramic view of Chicago's glittering skyline, the city lights winking against the dark sky. All the wealth and status she had amassed felt suddenly hollow. She thought of the teenage Helena, suffocated by poverty and fear, the one who had run away to carve out a life on her own. And look at what she had become, a successful but lonely woman, haunted by the child she left behind. Before she could fully process her thoughts, Helena's cell phone buzzed. It was a call from her financial advisor, Mark Thompson. He gave her grave news. A legal complication in a recent real estate venture threatened to unravel her carefully curated empire. Some under-the-table dealings by one of her partners, rumored to be connected to unscrupulous figures in the business world, now placed Helena's entire investment portfolio at risk. There were allegations swirling about bribery, money laundering, and inflated property valuations. The authorities were investigating, and Helena might get caught in the crossfire. Suddenly, the carefully balanced house of cards she had built seemed about to topple. She had spent years building Donovan Enterprises, forging partnerships with influential names like the rumored associate Sergei Kovalchuk, known for questionable finances in Eastern Europe. Now, it appeared her empire was teetering on the brink. Helena flung the phone onto the bed, hands shaking. Was this karmic retribution? For walking away from Christopher and Evelyn, for putting her ambition above all else? She couldn't dismiss the possibility that fate was exacting a price. First, she had found Evelyn only to face her daughter's heartbreak and resentment. Now, her entire fortune might be threatened. She sank onto the plush sofa, mind racing. She needed to clean up this scandal before it reached the press. She also needed to figure out how to make amends with her daughter. But every path forward seemed complicated, riddled with emotional landmines. There was no easy solution for a decades-long wound. And if her fortune collapsed, she wouldn't even have the clout to secure Evelyn's future, should the girl want any help at all. For the first time in years, Helena felt powerless. The calm, composed facade she wore in boardrooms trembled, and the woman beneath emerged, a mother terrified of reaping what she'd sown. That night, Evelyn returned home to their small apartment on the outskirts of the city. The air smelled of stale coffee and disinfectant, remnants of her father's hospital visits. Christopher Parker sat in a worn-out recliner, a knee brace fastened snugly around his leg. The sports channel played on low volume, but he wasn't really watching it. Instead, he gazed at a wrinkled photograph in his hand, the same photograph Evelyn had scrutinized 1,000 times growing up. "Dad," Evelyn said softly, "I need to talk to you." He turned, surprise lighting his tired eyes. "Honey, you're back late. Everything okay?" She hesitated for only a moment before blurting it out. "I saw her, Helena Donovan. She was at the hotel. She's my mother, isn't she?" The lines in Christopher's face deepened, and he set the photograph aside, letting out a weary sigh. "Yes. She was Helena Parker, back when we were married, but she changed her name to Donovan, her mother's maiden name, after she left. I never told you the full story because I didn't want you to hate her. Or me." A swell of emotions tightened in Evelyn's chest. "I need to know everything." Christopher patted the couch cushion, indicating for her to sit. Then he began, voice shaking with old heartbreak. He and Helena had been high school sweethearts, both desperate to escape the small-town life that offered little opportunity. They married too young, with big dreams, but no money. When Helena found out she was pregnant, fear consumed her. She was afraid of losing her shot at a grand life. Christopher tried to reassure her, but their finances were dire. When Evelyn was born, Helena fell into postpartum depression and felt trapped. One day, she simply vanished, leaving behind a short note. "I can't do this." "I filed missing person reports," Christopher said, wiping his eyes. "But she called weeks later to say she was safe. She didn't tell me where, and I couldn't trace her number. That was that. I tried to raise you as best as I could. I never received any money from her, not a single letter. After a while, I gave up hope of seeing her again." He looked at Evelyn, pain etched in every line of his face. "I'm sorry if I failed you by not telling you more. Part of me wanted to protect you from the heartbreak I felt." Evelyn's eyes burned with tears. The hole in her life suddenly felt much deeper. Helena spent the next few days juggling frantic phone calls with lawyers and accountants. Investigations into her business dealings escalated. The media smelled a scandal. She barely slept, bouncing between meetings to salvage her empire. Whispers spread among the wealthy elite. Some questioned whether Helena had knowingly participated in shady deals. Others distanced themselves to protect their reputations. In a rare moment of quiet, Helena sat at a desk in her penthouse suite, scanning news articles on her laptop. Every headline hinted at potential wrongdoing at Donovan Enterprises. She was furious at her partner, Bertrand Lefebvre, who had apparently orchestrated illegal payments overseas to gain building permits. He had assured her everything was legal, but his deception now threatened her entire life's work. As if the scandal weren't enough, Helena's thoughts returned repeatedly to Evelyn. After that brief, emotional confrontation, the girl had vanished. Helena had wanted to follow her, to plead for forgiveness, but she was too overwhelmed to act immediately. Now, guilt gnawed at her. She had told herself for years that she left to create a better future for them all, that once she found success, she could return triumphant, ready to provide. But success had turned into an obsession. She had never come back for Evelyn, and now it was too late to pretend it was only about protecting her. Knock, knock, the sound made her jump. She walked to the door and found a uniformed hotel manager, accompanied by a tall, broad-shouldered man in a dark suit. "Miss Donovan," the manager greeted politely. "I'm sorry for the interruption, but this is Michael Reyes, a private investigator. He says it's urgent." Helena's heart lurched. She hadn't hired any investigator. "Good evening," she said, stepping aside warily. "What's this about?" Michael Reyes cleared his throat and held up a file. I've been retained by certain members of your company's board. They want a private, internal investigation to ensure no further financial impropriety is missed. They insisted on immediate cooperation to protect the company's interests. Helena's stomach clenched. Now the board was investigating her too. She realized her once loyal backers were already preparing for damage control, possibly eyeing a way to remove her as CEO. And in that instant, for the first time in decades, she felt truly alone, with no one to turn to, not her estranged daughter, not the father of her child, not her business partners. The fortress of wealth and power she'd built was crumbling from within. The following weekend, fate intervened. The Rosenwald hosted a charity gala to support a children's hospital, a cause that Evelyn had volunteered for through her community college's service club. As part of the staff, she helped set up the silent auction. She hung banners, arranged centerpieces, and directed guests to the main ballroom. Meanwhile, the city's elite arrived in droves, dressed in glittering gowns and crisp tuxedos, each hoping to rub elbows with donors and maybe get a bit of publicity for their own philanthropic gestures. Helena Donovan, despite her ongoing troubles, had committed to attend. Her public relations team insisted she be seen supporting charitable causes, hoping it would offset the damaging headlines. So she arrived in a sleek black gown that belied her internal turmoil. Cameras flashed as she walked down the red carpet, her practiced smile masking the anxiety twisting her insides. Evelyn was stationed near the main entrance, discreetly guiding SIPs to their reserved tables. She had been bracing herself for the possibility of seeing Helena again. Yet when Helena finally appeared before her, it still felt like a shockwave. Their eyes met, and in that instant, the noisy crowd, the chatter, and the cameras seemed to fade into the background. "Evelyn," Helena said softly, stepping closer so the cameras wouldn't catch their conversation. "I've been trying to reach you." Evelyn's posture tensed, her heart hammering. "I'm working," she replied, glancing at a group of arrivals behind Helena, each waiting to check in. "I can't really talk now." Helena nodded, a flash of hurt crossing her features. "I understand, but please, after the gala, or any time you want, I'd like to explain." To make things right, anger flared in Evelyn's chest. "How can you possibly make up for 21 years in a single conversation?" she asked, voice trembling. Then she swallowed and looked away, her throat burning. She had a job to do, and wearing her heart on her sleeve could cost her the professionalism she needed. "If you'll excuse me, I need to do my job." Helena stepped aside, allowing Evelyn to address the next VIP in line. It was a short, stark moment, mother and daughter, standing together yet miles apart. Under the glimmering chandeliers, amid the swirl of guests and the flash of paparazzi, their silent turmoil deepened, a testament to how no amount of wealth or grandeur could fill the void of lost time and broken bonds. As the gala progressed, Evelyn couldn't avoid Helena entirely. The event was teeming with influential figures, from city council members to celebrity philanthropists. At one point, she overheard murmurs that even Richard Branson had donated a sizable sum from afar. She busied herself replenishing buffet stations and assisting the event organizers, yet her gaze kept drifting toward Helena's table. Later in the evening, a voice on the loudspeaker announced a performance by a string quartet, followed by a short speech from Helena Donovan, a keynote speaker. Evelyn braced herself behind a column in the back, trying to maintain a safe distance while still performing her duties. Helena approached the podium amidst polite applause. She began speaking, her voice steady despite the swirling controversies overshadowing her life. She thanked the donors, highlighted the importance of supporting children's healthcare, and then paused, face contemplative. "There's something personal I'd like to share," Helena said, her voice wavering for a moment. "Once upon a time, I struggled to care for my own child. Circumstances drove me to make choices I still regret. Today, I stand before you not just as a donor or a businesswoman, but as a mother who knows the value of second chances." Evelyn felt her chest tighten. The words hung heavy in the air. "Don't let fear or hardship push you away from the ones who need you most," Helena continued. "We can always choose compassion. We can always choose love." Applause erupted. Some guests murmured appreciative words, others looked on with mild confusion, not fully understanding the subtext. Evelyn watched, tears prickling her eyes. The sincerity in Helena's tone was unmistakable, but it also felt like a public confession that skirted around the personal pain she'd caused. Was it merely for show, another piece of PR wizardry, or was it genuine? As Helena stepped down from the podium, she locked eyes with Evelyn from across the ballroom. In that moment, Evelyn recognized real vulnerability in her mother's expression, an unspoken plea for a chance to mend what was broken. Before Evelyn could sort out her conflicting emotions, the event's MC took the stage to announce the silent auction winners. The crowd cheered, and the atmosphere shifted back to celebratory. Yet beneath the glittering veneer of the gala, an emotional storm raged, pulling mother and daughter into uncertain waters where forgiveness and regret waged a silent war. The very next morning, Helena's phone erupted with alerts. Financial news outlets reported that Donovan Enterprises had officially come under federal scrutiny. Investigators uncovered suspicious paperwork linking Helena's partner, Bertrand Lefebvre, to illegal property deals overseas. Helena's leadership was questioned. How could she not have known? In a matter of hours, her stock value plummeted. Investors fled, board members panicked, and Helena found herself on the brink of being ousted from her own company. Suddenly, the strings of power she once held so firmly were cut. She received a formal notice. The board had called an emergency meeting to discuss her position within the company. Desperate, Helena contacted every ally she had, only to find her phone calls went unanswered or were returned with apologies that ties needed to be severed. Even her longtime confidant, Mark Thompson, said he had to step back for legal reasons. The only text that arrived was from Michael Reyes, the private investigator, urging her to cooperate fully with the authorities if she wanted any chance of clearing her name. By late afternoon, the once unstoppable Helena Donovan felt cornered in her suite, packing her bags in a rush of anxiety. She would move to a smaller, more discreet residence, perhaps even a temporary corporate apartment. She wasn't sure how long she'd be hounded by investigators or paparazzi. In the midst of her frantic packing, an overwhelming wave of sadness hit her. She realized she was about to lose not just her fortune, but perhaps the final chance to be a meaningful part of Evelyn's life. Meanwhile, Evelyn was at the apartment with her father. She paced the living room, mind racing after glimpsing the headlines scrolling across the TV news. Her phone vibrated an unknown number. She hesitated before answering. "Evelyn," came Helena's voice, shaky, "I know you have every reason to ignore me, but I need to see you. I'm leaving the Rosenwald tonight. Please, will you come?" Evelyn's breath caught. A part of her wanted to hang up immediately. Another part, the one that remembered how she used to fantasize about meeting her mother, couldn't deny the pang of concern. "Okay," she whispered. "I'll meet you, but only for a few minutes." They arranged to meet at a quiet coffee shop near the hotel. Evelyn tried to steady her nerves, reminding herself of all the pain this woman had caused. She wouldn't let Helena's plight overshadow the wounds that had yet to heal. Yet she couldn't help but feel a stir of sympathy for the once mighty millionaire whose empire was now crumbling around her. The coffee shop was nearly empty when Evelyn arrived. Warm light from sconces on the exposed brick walls gave the place a cozy feel, despite the tension crackling in the air. Helena sat in a corner booth, dressed in a simple grey pantsuit, no glitz or glamour tonight. Dark circles under her eyes betrayed her exhaustion. Evelyn slid into the seat across from her, arms folded defensively. She caught a faint tremor in Helena's hands as she gripped her coffee mug. For a moment, neither spoke. Outside, raindrops spattered the window, drumming a soft, steady rhythm. "Thank you for coming," Helena began, voice hushed. "I need to be clear," Evelyn said, her tone guarded. "I'm not here to fix your problems. I'm here because I want answers about why you left, why you never tried to see me, and why you suddenly want back in my life now." Helena nodded, swallowing hard. "I understand. The truth is, I was scared. I was 19, broke, and convinced that if I stayed, I'd trap us in a cycle of poverty. I believed I had to leave to chase a future that would eventually help us all, but somewhere along the way, I got lost. Every success made me push the idea of returning further away. And then time slipped by. It got harder to face what I'd done. Evelyn's eyes flickered with pain and anger. You know, Dad struggled for years. I watched him come home in grease-stained clothes, his hands cut up from fixing cars. I had to grow up fast because I didn't have a mother. Tears threatened to spill, but Evelyn blinked them back. "You abandoned us." Helena lowered her gaze. I did, and I'll never forgive myself for it. Silence stretched, punctuated by the rain. Finally, Helena inhaled shakily. I don't expect you to forgive me. But I want to help if I can, especially now. My company is in trouble, but I have enough resources set aside for you to support your education, your father's medical bills, if you'll allow it. Evelyn stared at her, heart torn. She thought of how her father always said he never wanted Helena's money. Yet a small, desperate part of Evelyn recognized the financial strain they were under. She could sense Helena's sincerity, but also recognized the damage that might never truly be undone. A clap of thunder rolled in the distance. In that charged moment, Evelyn realized she was at a crossroads. Accept Helena's gesture or walk away forever. Either choice came with a price, and the echoes of her pain were impossible to ignore. Evelyn pulled her jacket tighter around herself, the chill of the coffee shop's air conditioning mingling with the cold fear in her chest. She had spent years imagining this moment, the chance to confront the woman who had abandoned her. Yet now that Helena sat across from her, looking fragile and human rather than powerful and untouchable, Evelyn felt more shattered than victorious. She studied her mother's face, the familiar tilt of the jawline, the weary eyes that mirrored her own. A stranger, and yet, somehow, a reflection. I don't know if I can forgive you, Evelyn said, her voice trembling despite her best efforts to stay composed. Every birthday, every school event, you were never there. Every time I fell and scraped my knee, every night I cried because I didn't understand why my mom didn't want me. You weren't there. Helena's face crumpled, tears gathering in her eyes. I wish I could take it all back. I wish I had been stronger, smarter, less selfish, but I wasn't, and I can never undo the hurt I caused you. Evelyn clenched her fists under the table, trying to anchor herself against the swell of emotions threatening to drown her. You left Dad to raise me alone. He worked himself into the ground. He skipped meals so I could eat. He missed opportunities because he refused to leave me without a parent. Helena bowed her head in shame, her voice breaking. I know. I think about it every day. The silence between them grew heavy, filled with all the years they had lost. Evelyn's mind flashed with memories. Her father sitting at the kitchen table, paying bills with a worried brow, her teenage self pretending she didn't care about the absence gnawing at her heart. She realized that what hurt the most wasn't just Helena's abandonment, it was the absence of choice. Evelyn had never been given a chance to know her mother, to ask why, to fight for a relationship. Helena lifted her gaze, desperation and sincerity blazing in her tear-filled eyes. I don't expect your forgiveness, Evelyn. I don't even expect you to want me in your life. But I'm here now, and I'm not running anymore. If there's anything I can do to help, even if it's just paying for your father's care, for your education, I want to do it. For a long moment, Evelyn didn't speak. Her heart ached. Accepting help from Helena felt like accepting part of the pain, and yet rejecting it seemed childish, even cruel, when her father desperately needed relief. My father deserves better than what life gave him, Evelyn whispered. I'll accept your help for him, not for me. This doesn't change how I feel about what you did. Helena nodded slowly, tears slipping down her cheeks. Of course. Whatever you need. There was a tentative hope in her voice, a quiet longing that made Evelyn's heart twist. Helena reached out, placing her palm lightly on the table, open, offering, vulnerable. Evelyn stared at the hand for a long moment, the same hand that had once cradled her as a baby, the same hand that had later let go. She shook her head gently and stood up, keeping her distance. I can't give you more than that. Not yet. Maybe not ever. I need time. Helena withdrew her hand slowly, accepting the unspoken rejection with a painful grace. Take all the time you need. I'll be here. Always. Evelyn's throat tightened. She turned and walked toward the door, every step feeling impossibly heavy. As she pushed the door open, the little bell above it chimed a mournful farewell. Outside, the air was cool and crisp. The city buzzed with life, unaware that somewhere within its streets a mother and daughter had cracked open a door long thought sealed shut, a door that might one day, if time and forgiveness allowed, swing open to something new. But for now, Evelyn needed space to heal, to breathe, to figure out who she was without the weight of Helena's choices bearing down on her shoulders. She disappeared into the night, leaving Helena alone in the glow of the coffee shop, nursing a fragile hope that perhaps, this time, she would find the strength to stay. 2 weeks passed in a strange, heavy blur. Evelyn threw herself into work and her classes, trying to outrun the emotional storm that the meeting with Helena had stirred up. Yet no matter how hard she tried to distract herself, memories of that night haunted her. The look of broken hope in Helena's eyes, the heaviness of the conversation, and the aching realization that her world would never be as simple as it once had been. One afternoon, as Evelyn sorted through the mail piled up at their small apartment, she spotted an envelope from the hospital. Her stomach knotted in reflex. Hospital bills were a constant source of anxiety, reminders of how close they always teetered on the edge. Bracing herself, she tore it open, her eyes widened in disbelief. Balance due $0.00. At first, she thought it was a mistake. She flipped the page, reading the note printed at the bottom. All current and outstanding balances have been fully satisfied by a private sponsor. Her breath caught. She knew immediately who it was. "Dad," she called, her voice wavering. Christopher Parker, seated in his worn recliner, looked up from the newspaper he was reading. He was recovering well from his latest surgery, though he still moved slowly, relying heavily on his cane. "What is it, honey?" Evelyn sat down beside him, the paper trembling slightly in her hand. "The hospital bills. They're paid. Someone covered everything." Christopher blinked, stunned. "What? Who would?" He trailed off, suspicion and wonder mingling in his expression. Evelyn hesitated. She had gone back and forth on whether to tell him the truth, but hiding it now seemed unfair, especially after everything they had endured together. It was her, Evelyn said softly. It was Helena. The name hung in the air like a ghost. Christopher stared at her for a long moment, absorbing the words. His weathered face, lined by years of hardship, was unreadable. Finally, he leaned back with a sigh that seemed to deflate his whole body. I don't know what to say," he murmured. "For so long, I hated her, for leaving, for not even checking if we were alive. But maybe she's trying to make things right in her own way." Evelyn twisted the hospital bill in her hands. "I don't know if it's enough. It doesn't fix everything." "No, it doesn't," he agreed. "But sometimes you take what small mercies life offers, not for the one who hurt you, but for yourself." The simple wisdom of his words sank deep into Evelyn's heart. Her father had lost so much, yet he still found room for grace. Maybe she could too, someday. That night, after Christopher went to bed, Evelyn found a letter slipped under their door. It was written on heavy, cream-colored stationery. Her name was inked in careful cursive across the front. She unfolded it with shaking hands. "Dear Evelyn," it began, "I know I can never undo the past. I don't expect forgiveness, but I hope that, one day, you'll find a way to heal from the pain I caused. I've decided to leave the city for a while, to step back and reflect on who I became and how far I strayed from the person I wanted to be. If you ever want to reach out, I've included my new contact information. No pressure. Just know that I'll always be here if you need me. Love, Mom." Evelyn's throat tightened at the final word, Mom. It wasn't a title Helena had earned easily, but seeing it written there made Evelyn feel something complicated and sharp twist inside her chest. She placed the letter gently on the kitchen table and sat back, staring at it for a long while. She didn't know she would ever reach out. The wounds were still fresh, the scars still tender. But for the first time, the rage didn't choke her completely. There was space now, thin and fragile, but real, for something else to grow. Forgiveness wasn't instant, healing wasn't linear. But somewhere in the wreckage, hope had quietly taken root, and maybe, just maybe, that was enough for now. Thank you for joining us on this rollercoaster journey of heartbreak and unexpected redemption. Evelyn's story reminds us that fate has a way of confronting us with buried truths, no matter how deeply we've tried to hide them. Helena Donovan chose wealth and prestige but lost sight of what truly mattered, only to come face to face with the daughter she abandoned, with devastating emotional and financial consequences. Yet in the end, a spark of hope flickers, suggesting that even the deepest wounds can mend if met with honesty, vulnerability, and genuine atonement. We hope this tale resonated with you, stirring emotions and reflections about family, forgiveness, and the price of ambition. If you found value, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel. We have many more heartfelt stories ready to inspire, challenge, and uplift. Thank you for watching, and stay tuned for our next dramatic real-life journey.